taking literally the most primal animal experience that we do the same exact way as other animals, except for our thinking brain that overanalyzes and judges and all of that, and merging that with being a modern day human, merging that with expectations of being able to control outcomes, being able to predict everything, being able to plan things. Inherent to birth is that it's unpredictable and that it's mysterious. And when you kind of let that part take over, it really can be magical.
Hi, welcome to another episode of Catching Up with That Jimmy, where I interview my friends and then take beautiful portraits of them. Today, I have my good friend Megan with me. Megan is a doula, and she's also a voice actress, and then she is a California native who grew up in Sherman Oaks. Hi, Megan.
Hi. Oh, yeah, hi.
Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, you really covered some main points. I'm an original Valley girl.
Valley.
More like North Hollywood, but it's okay. Like fourth generation.
Oh, wow.
And I went to school in San Francisco, and then I was in the Bay Area for a long time, and became a birth worker about 5.5 years ago. And I've been doing that ever since. I met my husband toward the end of college, and we're actually, this Saturday is going to be our 11th wedding anniversary.
Wow.
Thank you. Yeah, we still like each other a lot. That's pretty much it.
Nice.
Yeah.
So I want to tell everybody how we met. We met through a mutual friend, and she, at the time, was organizing a group called Mastermind. And I'm sure a lot of you probably know what a mastermind group is, but for those of you who don't know, Mastermind is a group for like-minded individuals, sometimes business owners, sometimes entrepreneurs, sometimes just business professionals, to get together on a weekly basis to check in on each other, hold each other accountable, and just help each other out. And that's how I met Megan, and I think we were inducted at the same time, because there were like 10 plus people in the group before us already. So yeah, I've really been enjoying your presence ever since. You have this very lively energy, and just you're always like so encouraging to others, you know? And so that's why I wanted to have you on the show, and also talk about your work, and just, you know, get to know you as a real ass person.
A real ass person. Oh, I keep forgetting.
Yes. And
well, I'm honored.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And so my interest, really, what I really wanted to talk about today is basically your experience as a birth worker. I introduced you as a doula.
Yeah.
I hope that's okay.
Yeah.
But doula is birth worker, right? And so, and I think that over the last 5 to 10 years, birth workers have been really popular, I guess, among like a lot of demographics. Yes, that's the word. Yes, demographics. And I even saw like an article, I think on Vanity Fair or Harper's Bazaar, that like a lot of celebrities basically are really into having birth workers assisting their births. So it's obviously very trendy. But you know, it's trendy right now, but it's a historical role. Yeah, like it's been around since the dawn of time, probably. Yeah. And so I really respect you for being a birth worker, and I want you to tell the audience, first of all, what's the difference between doula, birth worker, and then what's the
A midwife?
A midwife, yes.
Yeah.
What's the difference between a doula and a midwife?
Doula in itself is a word, it's actually derived from, it's a Greek word meaning woman servant. So birth worker is more of a general umbrella term for folks who work within the birth world. So they're one and the same kind of, but midwives might also call themselves a birth worker or a full spectrum doula who supports all outcomes of pregnancy. So I actually trained to be a full spectrum doula more recently, which means that I support folks who are going through miscarriage, who are choosing to have an abortion, who have had loss, as well as postpartum support. So I think just what you said in terms of this being, since the dawn of time, so much of my doula work is kind of bridging the gap that our society has left, really, like a deep, dark river of just not talking about birth in a real way, or pregnancy or postpartum, going back to even like body literacy, understanding truly how we work as humans. And so doulas are just the people who were around when we evolved to be in tribes, in small bands of people. Midwife literally means with woman. So midwives are just the wise women, the elders who gave birth and were the ones who attended births. So the difference between a midwife and a doula are that a midwife is an actual clinical provider. They're the medical provider, just as an obstetrician is. So they do all of the same things in birth as a doctor would. They just don't do surgery. Their expertise is low risk, low management, like normal physiological birth. A doula is someone who wears a lot of hats, as does a midwife, but a doula is more of an emotional support, physical support, educational support, spanning from the time, folks who are trying to conceive all the way to weeks, months postpartum.
So it sounds like to me that, as you mentioned, doula is like a full spectrum work. It covers many different areas. You wear so many hats. But it sounds to me, and I think that it's very apparent that doula, like birth workers, really have to hone in their psychological abilities. I'm not sure if that would be the correct way to put it, but I think that a lot of it is like a mental work, providing support.
For ourselves or for our clients, or both?
Both, for both of you. So which leads me to question, how stressful is it, when it comes to just providing emotional and mental support,
It's a loaded question, Jimee. Any birth workers who are watching are like, are you ready for this? No. What I tell my clients always, and I teach childbirth education as well, and what's really foundational is that people believe that birth and birth itself, right, this one kind of event, is so far from their current reality because we don't do a good job of being with that experience in modern day, right? Once birth really went into the hospitals, it wasn't until the 70s that partners were even allowed in the hospital. So it's been something that's really distanced from us, and has become really intervened with. So what is true is that you bring your whole self to this experience. And I say this to pregnant people and their partners. You bring all of your unique snowflake qualities, all of your idiosyncrasies, your strengths, but also your coping mechanisms and your generational trauma and your stress, right? So it can be a fine line of spending time with people in this the most vulnerable time of their lives, prenatally, meaning while they're pregnant. I'll meet with them 2 to 3 to 4 different times to get to know them, to kind of prepare them in all these different ways. But really, it's tuning into who are you already? Why did you become a parent? What are you already good at? And what are your values? Because those things are going to show up in your birth. But more importantly, they're going to be a through line to then what kind of parent you are, right? Because the birth is just one tiny part of the experience. So what can be really challenging is not pretending that we're therapists, right? And not kind of blurring that line. Having kind of structured boundaries around, even if we're going deep with people, understanding what our roles are. And the true challenge is teaching people about this as it's happening to them for the first time, kind of late in pregnancy. And having to bridge that gap between like what is the most primal thing that we can experience as humans. Not that it works all the time or that every body is going to do it the same way, because every labor is different. And sometimes there are infrastructure issues. But taking literally the most primal animal experience that we do the same exact way as other animals, except for our thinking brain that overanalyzes and judges and all of that, and merging that with being a modern day human, merging that with expectations of being able to control outcomes, being able to predict everything, being able to plan things. Inherent to birth is that it's unpredictable and that it's mysterious. And when you kind of let that part take over, it really can be magical. And so it's really like trying to marry modern day world and modern obstetrics and hospital based birthing for most of the part with what is really instinctual to us and what is very normal. And so, the celebrities that you're talking about are the reason why it's become trendy, why it's something that I'm doing and get paid for and not just a service that we provide, is because, in years of modern healthcare, unfortunately, the outcomes are actually worse right now than they were 40 years ago, 50 years ago. So there's a lot of challenge. I told you it would be a long answer. There's a lot of vicarious trauma. There's being on call for people for weeks at a time. There's a lot to it, and it's hard to not take on what other people are going through when it's so immense. And so every now and then, we really do have to step back and kind of recalibrate for our own well-being.
Yes. I can feel how taxing and stressful it can be, and it's definitely helpful to take some mental health break once in a while. But I found it really interesting that you mentioned that the whole process is about not predicting the future, not worrying about the future. It's really just experiencing it while it's happening. Yes. I find that very spiritual, actually, because in spirituality, it's all about just experiencing the now, experiencing the present moment, and not dwell on the past and not worry about the future, and just let things happen to you, because, basic, just as Kung Fu Panda says, the present is a gift, right? So we have to experience things as they come. It could get hard, it could be incredibly easy, but whichever way it goes, you have to just accept it and just live it, you know. And I find that very beautiful. So
it's actually what is foundational to labor itself being successful. It's what I say all the time, what doulas will say, it's one contraction at a time, right? It's moving your body and meeting sensations, even if they're the most intense and they're all consuming. If you're able to get to that place where you are working with the sensations, you're just in that contraction. You're just getting to the peak of intensity in that moment, and you're throwing everything away. when that contraction is over, maybe you regroup, maybe you have a big cry, right? Maybe you eat a bite of something, you move positions, you hug your partner, and you reset, and then you take a big breath, and you're going to the next one, and that's in the past. That's because there's literally a baby corkscrewing their way down your body, right? They require a range of movement and a range of flexibility. But we talk about this also in the vein of one contraction at a time, and then when you're in postpartum, it's one feeding at a time. It's one nap at a time, right? Especially as you're taking so much in. Everything is new. And all we can do as human beings, on our best days, are just take a fucking breath and reset, right? It's never about knowing what are the outcomes, what's actually gonna happen. It's how do we stay flexible and honor our own cues. And I'm saying this for myself too, right? So that really is all of it. It's how do I stay present in this process right now? Because in an hour from now, those hormones could surge, or my baby could, need me in this way that's really taxing, and I can only deal with it then.
And it reminds me of my mom's childbirth. My mom gave birth at a hospital, and my grandma is actually a midwife.
Oh wow!
Yeah,
I didn't know that.
Yeah, but of course, she didn't get involved with
in
my
your mom's birth.
Yeah,
a little too close to home.
Maybe, yeah. But my mom had a very intense, very difficult childbirth, and sometimes I wonder,
Are you an only child?
I am.
Yeah,
and sometimes I wonder if she had a doula to prepare her for this whole process, this whole journey. I wonder if the outcome would be a little bit different, and so yeah, I wonder that sometimes, and
Was your grandma, was she a hospital midwife, or she was at the hospital?
Yeah, she was a hospital midwife.
Yeah.
So yeah, but my mom, because my mom's, her birth process, I think at the hospital, she spent almost a day there, and then they decided right on the brink of them deciding to have a C-section. I came out. So
wow.
maybe she was scared of the C-section, and then maybe that fear pushed me out. I don't know. I should ask her, but all I know is that she had a really, really hard time, and I don't know, not to throw shade at the hospital, they probably didn't do a good job of comforting her. I don't know, but yeah, I wish she had a doula at the time,
I think one of the things that we can struggle with, and which what doulas can struggle with, or birth workers can struggle with, which connects back to the last question of what things are stressful, not bringing your own wishes and desires to the labor, right? But understanding that we're not there to save people. We're not there to ever guarantee that outcomes would be different. Over the years, the more I've learned about, again, what it is to be an animal human, to understand our nervous system and our stress responses, bare bones, what a doula does is give you either verbal or nonverbal affection, or not, just that holding the container of space, saying, I see you working really hard. This is normal. You are safe, right? And pivoting as maybe those conditions change. If it truly isn't safe, whatever's happening around them, we are someone who is safe to them because we've formed a relationship. And it's kind of this idea of people who go to childbirth ed classes aren't going to memorize all the things, right? Yeah. All of the intellectualizing of birth. But labor and birth and postpartum, being a human, I say, it's a felt experience. It's all of your senses. So maybe if your mom had someone who was there specifically for her, who knew her preferences, who could remind her in the moments where she had self-doubt, like, you're working so hard and it's going to be over soon and you're going to meet your baby boy, that absolutely can change how people labor, because it is such a mental game, and it's about promoting oxytocin, the love hormone, which is actually what makes your uterus contract, rather than promoting cortisol, which is our stress hormone. Yeah.
Thank you for that. Yeah, and it's important. I'm glad that you mentioned that. Like doulas do important work, but then you also can't put all your expectations on doulas. Like they can't be end all be all. Is that the right term? Yeah. So, but I think it's, at the end of the day, it's all about that trust and that relationship, right? And so yeah, I feel like every successful outcome of any thing, project, or events comes from a trusting and good relationship.
People who have long, close trusted relationships with people who they have regular contact with actually have better health outcomes. And I just see that all the time in labor and birth. It's, most people who are pregnant, if they were out in a field somewhere by themselves, they could birth that baby and most of them would be just fine, because our bodies and our and birth has evolved that babies want to thrive and that birth knows what it's doing, quite honestly. So to say that you have to have a doula and you have to have a partner and all of that, bare bones is that science is truly magical. It's smart. It's evolved for babies and their gestational carriers to thrive. But that would be in the most animal way. And so because most people give birth in hospitals and most people have, environments where there's way more stimuli and you kind of in your judging brain, it becomes harder to kind of just tap into that knowing. And so it is really important that those relationships exist, because you can have that reflection of, yes, this is normal. Yes, this is safe.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
In that me talking in circles?
Yeah. It does. And going off topic a little bit, you mentioned sometimes people can just give birth on their own in the middle of nowhere, right?
Yeah.
And I have heard that happen with my friends too. I have friends who not my friends, but my friend's friend who gave birth on their way to the hospital in their car, and so I'm like, but they already had childbirths before, so this would have been their third child, and so they already are experienced. So I'm like, I feel like if you're really tapped into your body, magical things really can happen, and it's like, I'm not making comparisons, but it reminds me of when I'm high. Basically, when I'm high, I'm very in tune with my body. I just everything is just really sensitive to me, and I'm not judging myself basically, and I feel like if people learn to just judge themselves less and just stop thinking and more feeling, I think that it would be easier for them to get over something significant like childbirth.
Yeah.
I don't know. Does that make sense at all?
Yeah. I mean, something what I grapple with ultimately is how much impact am I actually making supporting individual families. That I know that I'm an emotional comfort, and I know that I, teach people a lot in the process, and to have someone there postpartum, because if you're having medical care in the hospital, you don't see someone again as the birthing person until 6 weeks. The baby is seen, but the pregnant person is not seen for 6 weeks unless you have a cesarean. So being able to be there for them, full circle, and be checking in and making sure that emotionally, physically they're doing well and they have their needs met, they have resources, that's huge, right? So of course I feel like that carries tremendous value, and it's an honor to be there for individual families, but there are so many things that we see, kind of how you called like doula, the doula career right now feels kind of trendy. Like I talk about the fact that there are trends in childbirth based on societally what's going on, and how much priority and how much money is being thrown at studying certain parts of the process, in the evidence, in gathering the evidence that truly changes outcomes. So for me, it always comes back to the systems level issues, that it's hard to kind of just put the onus on the individual, that like if we just judged ourselves, not to diminish what you're saying, but as someone who's like experienced a lot of anxiety in my life, is it putting it all on me to like change within a system that's really oppressive? Or is it really about like living in a culture that doesn't prioritize mental health and like quality of life, and works us really hard and charges for a lot of things, and is, and when it comes to medicine, not only are we not truly taught about our bodies in a real, fully literate way from a young age, right? So much of our country is being taught about abstinence, and like abortion rights have been taken away, and it's all connected. Anti-racism is also connected, because obstetrics is literally, the history of obstetrics is rooted in racism, and in taking what birth was for most people, which were home births with granny midwives, which were Black women and descendants of slavery, and they wanted to take birth away and control outcomes as white men, essentially. So like that's the start of birth in the hospital. And so, after almost 6 years doing this work, really my question always comes back to like, how do we impact more people, and how do we get education out there earlier than just when you're in your 3rd trimester, right? Because all of that confidence takes embodying. Do you know what I mean? Like embodying the information, embodying the context, embodying the value of the process, and not just like, will I get an epidural, will I not? I didn't know about any of this until I was a doula. There are no stupid questions. There are no like stupid inquiries or revelations or whatever. The reason why I love birth work is because it is fascinating. It is how we all got here. It is always going to be relevant as long as humans are on this earth. And it's really powerful, and it's been neglected horribly, and it's intersectional in all the ways. And so, what is a really hard part for me is, how do I get what I have learned out there without like overwhelming people with information, or feeling like it's daunting to take on. Really like to disseminate from what I just said is that it birth and body literacy and our rights as a human in bodily autonomy relate to everyone. The things that I educate people about, mostly who are giving birth in a hospital, are what are your rights as a patient? How do you really ask all the questions to get the answers that you need to have informed consent? That anyone needs that who's going to get care for themselves, right? So like, I know it can feel really big, but it's really relevant to everyone, you know?
It really is.
Yeah.
Wow, that's a very important information that I think that everybody can benefit from knowing. And so thank you for your PSA.
Always. I've got a lot of them.
So the last segment of today is a lightning round where I ask you basically what your preferences are. So, and of course everyone.
I'll try not to look scared.
Yes, okay. So mayo or ranch?
Ranch.
Toilet rolls faced up or down?
The only way to do it, which is to pull it towards you. What does that mean? Is it up? It's up.
No, like, yeah, you can pull it towards you either up or down, but like,
no.
but you know what I'm talking about, right? Like facing down or up.
Facing down then.
Yeah, if it's facing down, it means you have to grab it from underneath. If it's facing up, you grab it from top. Does that make sense? Maybe I'm wording it wrong.
Up. The only way, which is to just pull it in the direction that it naturally flows.
Okay, yes, up. New York or LA?
Oh, that's hard. New York in my dreams, LA in reality.
Okay. Hospital birth versus home birth?
For me, home birth.
Apple versus Android and everyone else?
I've only ever had an Apple.
Capitalism versus socialism?
Socialism.
Really?
Capitalism?
Indica versus sativa?
Oh, I have no idea.
Okay. Morning sex versus night sex / afternoon sex?
Oh, that's hard. Night sex.
Religion versus spirituality?
Spirituality.
Boxers versus briefs?
My opinion's changed. I'm going to say briefs.
Cereal over milk versus milk over cereal?
Milk over cereal.
Yay. You're normal. Just kidding. No, no, you did.
Like, do you put the cereal in first?
Yeah, you put the cereal in the bowl first, and then you pour the milk over. Yeah. Congratulations, you're not weird. Or even if you are, it's fine. Like, you can be whoever you want. Being normal is overrated, okay? Yes. So, and that concludes our interview for the day. Thank you so much, Megan, for being part of this show and being so educational. And I hope that you guys learned a lot today. And I know I definitely did. And I hope for further success for your doula business and your voice acting.
Thank you so much. It's been so lovely. I'm very grateful to have done this with you.
Thank you. And we're gonna do our photo shoot now. Okay, great. Okay, so that's the